He thought one signature on $1 million check could bend heaven to his will, but some things cannot be bought. Before we begin, I invite you to subscribe to this channel and walk with me through this entire journey, because this is more than a story, it's a mirror. If you've ever wondered whether money could buy peace, healing, or even God's favor, this story will stir something deep within you. And at the end, I'll share a powerful scripture that reveals the priceless truth of grace. Now, step with me into the life of a man whose wealth filled every room he entered, except the one place his soul was starving for. The boardroom smelled of cedarwood and polished marble, a scent as carefully curated as the paintings on the walls. Every surface gleamed, floor-to-ceiling windows polished to diamond clarity, a mahogany table so wide it seemed to stretch into forever, and brass fixtures that caught the morning light in golden shards. At the far end of the table sat Alexander Harrington, 52 years old, broad-shouldered, his posture rigid like a general at war. His eyes, icy blue with flecks of steel, were the kind that made subordinates look away. Black hair, streaked with silver, was combed back neatly, as if a single strand out of place would betray weakness. His navy three-piece suit, tailored in London, hugged his frame with quiet authority, but beneath the control was a storm. His pen clicked rhythmically against the table's glossy surface. In front of him lay a white envelope, untouched but glowing in his imagination like a live coal. Inside it, a check, $10 million, enough to rebuild hospitals, fund research labs, or purchase entire blocks of real estate. But that was not its purpose today. He glanced at the clock. The seconds ticked like hammers. Behind him, the skyline pulsed, skyscrapers stabbing into a sky tinged with silver clouds, the city below alive with horns, engines, and ambition. Normally, that view reminded him of power, conquest, dominion. Today, it reminded him of silence. He rose abruptly and crossed the room. His reflection in the glass met him, jaw set, eyes hollow, shoulders tense. He barely recognized the man staring back. "Sir?" A voice broke through the quiet. It was David Sloan, his business partner of 20 years, standing in the doorway. A man shorter than Alexander, with thinning blonde hair and a permanent nervous smile. He clutched a tablet under his arm. "You're still here," David said carefully. Alexander turned sharply. "Where else would I be?" David hesitated, then gestured toward the envelope. "That's it, isn't it?" Alexander said nothing, only slid his hand protectively over the envelope. David shifted uncomfortably. "Look, Alex, I've stood by you through hostile takeovers, bankruptcies, even that mess in Zurich. But this, writing a blank check to a church?" He shook his head. "You can't buy God." Alexander's eyes narrowed, voice cold as glass. "You think I'm buying God? I'm making an investment. Every field has rules, David. Wall Street, real estate, energy. Why should heaven be any different?" David's laugh was nervous, forced. "Because heaven doesn't run on ROI, it runs on faith." Alexander leaned across the table, his presence suffocating. "Faith? My faith is $10 million strong." David fell silent. His lips parted as though to argue, but something in Alexander's gaze silenced him. That night, Alexander sat at a lavish charity dinner, chandeliers dripping with crystals, waiters gliding silently in white gloves. Laughter filled the air as wealthy donors boasted about their contributions. Beside him, David tried again. "Alex, this isn't you. You never gave a dime without leverage. What's changed?" Alexander's jaw tightened. He swirled the wine in his glass, watching the crimson liquid catch the light. Elena. The name silenced David. Everyone knew about Elena Harrington. Alexander's only daughter, 22, her laughter once the heartbeat of her father's world. Now she lay in a hospital bed, pale, frail, machines beeping her songs of survival. David lowered his voice. "I'm sorry. I truly am. But don't let grief drive you into the arms of manipulators." Alexander's eyes darkened. "If they can deliver, I don't care what they are. Pastor Daniel says sacrifice unlocks heaven. If that's true, then heaven will open tonight." Back in the boardroom, alone again, Alexander finally reached for the envelope. His hand trembled, not from fear, he would never admit fear, but from the weight of the moment. His thoughts whispered like a courtroom. You've built empires, you've buried rivals, you've made governments bow, and yet, here you are, begging heaven like a beggar in a suit. He shook the thought off. His grip tightened on the envelope. He whispered aloud as if bargaining with the silence, "If this is what it takes, then so be it." But as he slipped the envelope into his briefcase, a voice stirred, soft, almost sorrowful, from some forgotten corner of childhood. What shall it profit a man if he gain the whole world and lose his own soul? Alexander froze. The words echoed in his skull, unwelcome, intrusive. He slammed the case shut and straightened his tie. No more voices, he muttered, only results. Tonight he would deliver the check, and heaven would have to answer. The Mercedes S-Class purred to a stop, its black paint swallowing the neon glow of the city. The driver stepped out, his polished shoes clicking against the pavement as he rushed to open the rear door. Alexander emerged, his tall frame wrapped in a tailored coat, the night air cool against his face. The megachurch loomed ahead, the sanctuary of light, its glass facade glittering like a jewel box, each pane reflecting the dying embers of the sun. Golden floodlights washed the building, making it appear less like a house of prayer and more like a palace built to impress kings. The sound struck him first. Voices, hundreds of them, singing in unison, their harmonies booming through hidden speakers mounted along the outer walls. The ground vibrated faintly with bass notes from drums, as if the earth itself pulsed with expectation. Crowds surged forward, families in coats too thin for the chill, women in sequined dresses, businessmen with loosened ties, children clinging to their parents' hands. A carnival of humanity pressed toward the massive bronze doors. The smell came next, roasted chestnuts from a vendor on the corner, mingling with perfume trailing from sleek limousines. The aroma of sweat, leather jackets and hair gel mingled with that of fried dough and candied almonds. Alexander adjusted his cufflinks, his posture commanding. He was used to walking into places where whispers followed him. Tonight was no exception. Heads turned, fingers pointed discreetly. "Is that?" a woman whispered. "Harrington. Alexander Harrington." And the chauffeur leaned toward him before closing the car door. "Shall I wait here, sir?" Alexander's reply was crisp. "No. Go home. I'll call when I'm finished." The man hesitated, eyes darting toward the cathedral-like structure. "Sir, do you really believe?" "Believe?" Alexander cut him off, blue eyes sharp as glass. "I believe in results. That's why we're here." He strode forward, leather briefcase gripped tightly at his side. 10 million reasons to bend heaven. Inside, the lobby exploded with light. A chandelier the size of a small car hung overhead, glittering with thousands of crystals. Marble floors mirrored every step, spotless and cold. Screens mounted on walls flashed the night's theme, a night of miracles. A greeter in a shining badge approached, smile practiced, posture perfect. "Good evening, sir. Welcome to the sanctuary." Alexander studied him briefly. First time. The greeter's gaze flicked to the briefcase. His grin widened. "Then tonight will change your life." Escorted by 2 men in identical dark suits, Alexander was ushered past velvet ropes into the VIP section. Whispers rippled behind him. Phones lifted discreetly, faces lit by their screens as they captured the arrival of one of the richest men in the city. The sanctuary itself was a spectacle. Rows upon rows of seats fanned out like an amphitheater, packed with bodies swaying to the music. Spotlights danced across the stage, where a full band played, electric guitars, drums, saxophones, all woven into an almost rock concert-like worship. And then a voice. "Alexander Harrington!" The sound boomed through the speakers, magnified and warm. All eyes turned as Pastor Daniel stepped forward. He was a man of presence, bronzed skin, hair slicked back perfectly, smile so white it gleamed beneath the lights. His suit, tailored and white as snow, shimmered with rhinestones that caught every movement. A heavy diamond-encrusted cross hung against his chest. He stretched out both arms, his microphone capturing every syllable. "My brother, we've been expecting you." Alexander clasped his hand firmly, his own expression unreadable. "You've heard of me?" Daniel chuckled, turning to the crowd. "Who hasn't?" He faced Alexander again. "But tonight isn't about your name. It's about your faith." Alexander's lips pressed into a thin line. "Faith hasn't done much for me lately." Daniel's eyes glimmered, unbothered. "That's because faith without seed is like a barren field. But when you sow, when you sow," he gestured broadly, "you unleash heaven." The band struck a triumphant chord. Voices rose. Ushers moved with velvet baskets collecting offerings. Screens displayed live donation numbers climbing higher. Alexander's heart pounded. His hand tightened on the briefcase. This was it. The transaction. He rose, shoulders squared, every eye on him. Each step toward the pulpit echoed click, 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 like a gavel striking judgment. He placed the envelope down deliberately, his fingers brushing the polished wood. Gasps rippled across the sanctuary. Phones lifted, flashlights glowed. Daniel's eyes widened, not in shock, but in delight. He seized Alexander's arm and raised it high. "Church, tonight a seed has been sown that will shake heaven itself." Applause erupted like thunder. People shouted, wept, fell to their knees, hands stretched toward the altar. Alexander leaned toward Daniel, his voice low, meant only for him. "I gave. Now let's see what your God does." Daniel's smile faltered for a second, just a second, before widening again for the cameras. "Oh, he will move, my brother. You will see wonders." But Alexander felt it, something the cameras couldn't capture. A chill, a silence, as though heaven itself had turned away, and in that silence a verse whispered across his mind, unwelcome, like a ghost from childhood. "Your money perish with you, because you thought you could buy the gift of God with money." He clenched his fists, forced the thought away. The crowd roared. The pastor beamed. The lights blinded. But heaven was silent, and silence was more terrifying than any no. Morning broke across the city, gold spilling through skyscraper glass like molten fire. Alexander stood at the window of his penthouse, the skyline at his feet. Normally, mornings brought clarity. Today, they brought nothing but waiting. His phone buzzed. Caller ID, Pastor Daniel. "Brother Harrington!" Daniel's voice boomed, even through the line. "What a night! The heavens are stirred. I felt it. Didn't you?" Alexander's jaw tightened. "I didn't feel anything." A pause. Then a chuckle, warm but rehearsed. "Faith isn't about feelings, my friend. It's about planting seed and expecting harvest." "I planted," Alexander snapped. 10 million. Where's the harvest?" Daniel's tone softened, syrupy. "Don't rush the Lord. Miracles unfold in his timing. But you will see. You will see." Alexander lowered the phone, staring at the city far below. Deadlines, contracts, acquisitions. His world ran on timetables. But heaven, it seemed, did not. That afternoon he entered Elena's hospital room. The air was heavy with antiseptic. Wilted flowers in the corner, filling the silence with their fading scent. Machines beeped steadily. "Dad?" Elena's voice was weak, a whisper stretched thin. Alexander forced a smile. "I'm here." She studied him with pale eyes that mirrored her mother's. "You look tired." "I've been working on something. For you." Her lips curved faintly. "Always working." His throat tightened. "Not work. Something else." I gave. I made a gift. To God." Confusion flickered across her face. "You gave money." "Yes," he said firmly. "A seed. Pastor Daniel says it will release a miracle." Her gaze lingered on him, soft but piercing. "Dad, God isn't a business partner." The words stung deeper than he let on. His hand clenched against the chair. "You don't understand. This is about leverage, influence, strategy. It works everywhere else. Why not in heaven?" She shook her head slowly. "Because grace isn't for sale." Her words clung to him like smoke long after he left. That evening, the megachurch broadcast filled his penthouse. Screens flashed testimonies, smiling faces, debts erased, bodies healed. Pastor Daniel's voice thundered, "Your seed unlocks the impossible." Alexander muttered at the screen. "Then where's mine?" The empty room gave no answer. But a whisper stirred again, quiet, relentless. "Why do you spend money for that which is not bread, and your labor for that which does not satisfy?" His glass of whiskey shattered against the marble floor, and in the silence that followed, Alexander realized he wasn't making a deal. He was walking into a war. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee. Machines hummed steadily, a monotone rhythm that mocked Alexander's heartbeat, which pounded like war drums. He sat by Elena's bedside, his large hand gripping her fragile one. Her skin was cool, almost translucent, veins faintly blue beneath. The rise and fall of her chest was so shallow, he found himself leaning in, checking to see if she was still breathing. "Hold on, Elena," he whispered, jaw clenched. "It won't be long now. Heaven owes us." Her eyelids fluttered, her lips parted. "Dad, please, don't talk like that." "I mean it," Alexander said, voice cracking like broken glass. "I gave more than anyone, more than they've ever seen. Pastor Daniel said miracles follow sacrifice. So where is it? Why isn't it working?" Elena's eyes, weak, dim yet filled with clarity, locked onto his. "Because love can't be bought, Dad, and that's all God really gives. Love." Alexander turned away, throat tightening. Love didn't pay surgeons. Love didn't change test results. Love was powerless against death. His phone buzzed. Pastor Daniel. He stepped into the corridor, where faded posters about hope and healing decorated the pale green walls. Nurses passed by, their eyes darting toward him with quiet pity. "Brother Harrington!" Daniel's voice thundered from the speaker, syrupy and confident. "The Lord impressed on me. You mustn't lose heart. The harvest is coming." Alexander pressed the phone hard to his ear. "When? Tell me when." "Patience," Daniel replied smoothly. "Faith requires waiting." Waiting?" Alexander hissed, his voice sharp enough to draw stares from passing nurses. "My daughter doesn't have time for waiting." A pause. Then Daniel lowered his tone, almost conspiratorial. "Then sow again. Double the seed, double the breakthrough. You of all people understand investment." Alexander's chest burned. His voice dropped to a growl. "Are you saying 10 million wasn't enough?" "I'm saying," Daniel purred, "faith is measured not in numbers, but in surrender. If you want heaven's attention, give heaven everything." Alexander ended the call without a word. His fist trembled as he slid the phone back into his pocket. Back in the room, Elena stirred. Her voice was barely a whisper. "You're trying to buy God, aren't you?" He froze. The words landed like a hammer striking stone. "You don't need to buy him," she whispered again. "You just need to let him in." Her fragile hand squeezed his. Her eyes closed. Sleep claimed her. Alexander sat in silence, staring at her pale frame. The beeping of machines filled the room like mockery. That night, long after she slept, he stood before the glass wall of his penthouse. The city sparkled beneath him, towers of glass and steel glowing like constellations, a kingdom he had conquered. And yet here he stood, powerless before a god he tried to bargain with. He pulled open a drawer, retrieving his checkbook. His pen hovered above the page, the ink trembling with his hand. But as the nib touched paper, it came again. That silence, that chill, that dreadful certainty that no amount of money could bridge the gap between him and heaven. For the first time in decades, Alexander Harrington felt something foreign. Fear. The morning began with shattering glass. Not sunlight, glass. A crystal decanter lay in pieces across the floor of Alexander's office. His hand still trembled from dropping it. On the massive screen mounted to the wall, red numbers bled across the ticker. Headlines screamed in bold, "Harrington Global shares plunge, 12% overnight. Investors panic." After CEO's reckless 10-meter church donation, his phone buzzed relentlessly. "Pull the statements!" an executive shouted. "You're tanking the brand!" another barked. "Wall Street doesn't forgive madness, Harrington!" Alexander slammed the phone down. Shards crunched beneath his Italian leather shoes as he paced, rage boiling. His reflection in the window looked cornered, not commanding. This wasn't supposed to happen. The seed was supposed to bring blessing, not chaos. At the hospital, Elena stirred as he entered. Her voice was fragile, yet sharper than any headline. "Dad, you look worse than me." He forced a smile, sat beside her. "Don't worry about me. Just focus on getting better." "I heard the nurses talking," she whispered. "They said you gave away everything." He hesitated. "Not everything. Just enough to show heaven I'm serious." Her pale eyes brimmed with tears. "Why can't you just be my dad? Why do you have to fight God?" He swallowed hard. "Because he's not listening. And when someone doesn't listen, you make them." Her voice cracked into a cough, machines spiking. "You can't force him, Dad. You'll lose everything trying." Back at the office, the collapse accelerated. The boardroom was filled with tense faces. Executives avoided his eyes. "Alexander," his CFO said, adjusting her glasses, "we can't explain this. Shareholders call it religious gambling." "I don't care what they call it," Alexander roared, fist slamming against mahogany. "This is about saving my daughter." The room froze. They had never seen him break. An executive leaned forward cautiously. "But if you destroy the company in the process, what will she come home to?" The words pierced him. He shoved the wound deeper with pride. "I built this empire. I can rebuild it." That night his penthouse was silent, except for Pastor Daniel's voice on speakerphone. "Brother Harrington, trials come before triumph. The enemy attacks hardest when the miracle is closest." Alexander poured whiskey with trembling hands. "My company is crumbling, my daughter's dying, and heaven's still silent. Don't preach triumph to me." Daniel's tone sharpened. "Then sow again. Triple the seed." Abraham offered Isaac. "What will you withhold?" Alexander's voice cracked, a blend of rage and despair. "Are you asking me for more money?" "I'm asking you for obedience," Daniel replied smoothly. "Heaven watches." Alexander hurled the phone across the room. Later, at the hospital, Eleanor clutched a small Bible against her chest. Her voice was faint, fragile. "Dad, sit with me. Just read." He looked at the book, then at her trembling hands. Something in him recoiled. He wasn't ready. He kissed her forehead. "I'll fix this, somehow." But as he left, her voice trailed after him, soft but piercing. "You're losing me, Dad, and yourself." That night, Alexander stood before his mirror. His reflection, hollow-eyed, jaw slack, shoulders hunched, did not resemble the Titan of Wall Street. For the first time, he wondered if the silence wasn't God's absence, but his answer. And that thought terrified him more than the ruin of everything else. The boardroom, once Alexander's throne room, now felt like a courtroom. The air was stale with burnt coffee, the mahogany table reflecting the tense faces of executives who no longer looked at him with loyalty, but with suspicion. For decades, Alexander's voice had commanded this room. Tonight, his silence screamed louder than orders ever had. The double doors swung open. Footsteps echoed across the polished floor. A man entered, tall, lean, streaks of grey in his dark hair. His suit was modest, not designer. His shoes carried no shine, but his eyes, calm, unafraid, cut through the room. Alexander's breath caught. Marcus Kane. The name alone was enough to send a ripple through the board. Years ago, Marcus had been a rising star in finance, nearly Alexander's equal. But Alexander crushed him in a ruthless takeover, stripping him of assets, reputation, and pride. Marcus had vanished into bankruptcy, a footnote in Alexander's victories. And now, here he stood. "What is he doing here?" Alexander's voice sliced through the air, cold and sharp. The CFO cleared her throat nervously. "Mr. Kane represents a group of investors, potential buyers for one of our divisions." Alexander slammed his palm against the table, the sound cracking like a whip. "I won't sell to him." Marcus raised a hand, calm. "Relax, Harrington. I didn't come for revenge. I came because I think you need to hear something." Alexander sneered. "From you? The man I buried in the market?" Marcus didn't flinch. His gaze was steady, unshaken. "Yes, the one you buried. And yet, here I stand, alive, whole, because I learned something you never did. The boardroom stilled. Executives leaned in, sensing history colliding with destiny. Alexander's jaw clenched. "Spare me the sermon." Marcus stepped closer, voice low, but carrying weight. "You spent your life buying influence, Harrington. Buying power. Now you're trying to buy God. But heaven doesn't take bids." A flicker crossed Alexander's face. Unease he tried to mask. "You don't know what you're talking about." Marcus leaned closer, his words deliberate. "I know exactly what I'm talking about, because I tried it too. I thought I could bargain my way into blessing, and I lost everything, until I realized God doesn't want your wealth. He wants you." The words struck Alexander like a gavel. He forced a brittle laugh. "You sound like a preacher. Did bankruptcy turn you into a saint?" Marcus's expression softened. "No, grace did." The silence that followed was unbearable. Even Alexander's executives shifted in their seats, their eyes moving from one man to the other. Marcus placed a hand on the polished table, his voice steady. "Alexander, you think you've hit bottom. You haven't. But when you do, and you will, remember this. God's gift can't be bought. It's already been paid for." With that, Marcus turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing louder than the applause Alexander once commanded. The room stayed silent. Executives avoided Alexander's gaze. He stood rigid, fists trembling at his sides, his reflection fractured in the glossy table. For the first time, Alexander wondered, had his greatest rival just handed him the one truth he'd been running from all along? The penthouse was cloaked in darkness, the city glowing faintly below like scattered embers. Once those lights meant empire. Tonight they meant nothing. Alexander stood in his study, the weight of ruin pressing on his shoulders. His company was crumbling. Investors had fled. Marcus Kane's words haunted him, but nothing tormented him more than the sound of Elena's weakening breaths down the hall. On his desk lay a Bible, its cover worn, its pages untouched. Elena had left it for him. He hadn't opened it. A whiskey glass sat beside it, untouched, amber liquid catching the dim light. Alexander stared at his reflection in the glass wall, eyes bloodshot, jaw slack, shoulders hunched, a man undone. And then something snapped. He grabbed the glass and hurled it across the room. Shards exploded, scattering like fallen stars. His voice roared into the silence. "Where are you, God?" His chest heaved, voice ragged. "I paid. I gave everything. 10 million. Do you hear me? I kept my part of the deal. Where is yours?" The silence was suffocating. He slammed his fists onto the desk. "Answer me. Do something. Save her. What good is a God who doesn't answer when begged, when paid, when—" His voice cracked. He collapsed into the leather chair, trembling. His hands covered his face. And for the first time in decades, Alexander Harrington sobbed, not the controlled grief of a man preserving dignity, but raw, violent sobs that tore from deep inside. And in that brokenness, the silence shifted. It wasn't cold. It wasn't mocking. It was tender. A memory surfaced. His mother's voice, soft and steady, reading scripture at his childhood bedside. "Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." The sobs deepened. Alexander wept like a child. The door creaked. Elena stood there, frail, a hospital blanket around her shoulders. She leaned against the frame, her body trembling, yet her eyes burning with quiet fire. "Dad," she whispered, voice barely audible. "Stop fighting him. Just let him love you." He looked up, face streaked with tears. His voice cracked. "I don't know how." She crossed the room, every step shaky, until she collapsed into his arms. Her embrace was weak, but her presence was fierce. "Neither do I," she whispered. "But he does." And Alexander broke. He let the words pierce. He let the silence hold him. He let the tears fall without shame. It wasn't surrender to failure. It was surrender to grace. The pride that built empires and buried rivals shattered that night. In a whisper, a daughter's embrace, and the presence of a God who had never been for sale. The hospital room was drenched in early morning light, golden rays slipping through half-open blinds and casting stripes across the white walls. The air was heavy, with the sterile scent of antiseptic, punctuated by the rhythmic beeping of machines that had become the lullaby of Alexander's nights. He sat beside Elena's bed, a worn Bible open in his lap. The pages felt strange beneath his hands, thin, fragile, yet alive. His eyes traced words he had once mocked. "For by grace are ye saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It is the gift of God." Gift, not a contract, not a deal, not a bribe. Tears blurred his vision. For the first time, he understood. What he had chased his entire life could never be earned, never bought, never forced. Grace had been waiting all along. Free. The door opened. Marcus Kane stepped inside, holding 2 paper cups of coffee. No boardroom, no contracts this time. Just a man with lines on his face, eyes calm, shoulders relaxed. "I heard she's stable," Marcus said softly. Alexander wiped his eyes quickly, embarrassed by the tears. "Doctors don't know why. She should have declined overnight, but she hasn't." Marcus handed him a cup. "Maybe because for the first time in your life, you stopped trying to control everything." Alexander let out a bitter chuckle. "Control built my empire." Marcus smiled gently. "And surrender will save your soul." The words sank deep. Alexander looked at Elena, her fragile frame, her slow breathing, then back at Marcus, the rival he had once destroyed. "I don't deserve a second chance," Alexander whispered. Marcus set a hand on his shoulder. "None of us do. That's what makes it grace." At that moment, Elena stirred. Her eyes opened, tired but brighter than yesterday. A weak smile tugged at her lips. "Dad, you look different." He leaned close, voice trembling. "Maybe I finally am." He bowed his head. For the first time, Alexander Harrington prayed, not with bargaining, not with demands, but with surrender. His words were simple, halting, raw. "God, I have nothing left to give, but if you'll have me, I'm yours." No thunder split the sky, no angel descended in fire, but something shifted. The weight on his chest lifted. The silence that once mocked him now embraced him. The chains of pride shattered. The miracle had come, not in the way he had expected, not in the way he had paid for, but in the way he needed most. Alexander Harrington, the man who once thought he could buy heaven, finally discovered the priceless truth. Heaven had already paid for him. Beloved listener, we've walked together through Alexander's journey, through the towers of wealth, through the silence of unanswered prayers, through the collapse of pride, and finally into the arms of grace. And here is the truth brighter than any fortune. You cannot buy what God gives for free. Money can build hospitals, money can feed the hungry, money can even move nations, but money cannot purchase peace. It cannot heal the soul. It cannot bribe the God who already gave everything at the cross. Alexander thought the miracle was his daughter's healing, but the greater miracle was in his heart. The moment pride shattered, the moment he stopped bargaining, the moment he surrendered. And now I ask you, what are you trying to buy with your own life? Security, success, approval, lay it down. Because grace flows not through transactions, but through trust. The Bible says in Acts 8:20, "Your money perish with you, because you thought that the gift of God may be purchased with money." And in Isaiah 55:1, "Come, all you who are thirsty, come to the waters, and you who have no money, come, buy and eat." Yes, come, buy wine and milk without money and without price. And again in Ephesians 2:8-9, "For by grace are ye saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast." This is the invitation. This is the miracle. Salvation is free because it has already been paid for with the blood of Jesus. Alexander found it, and so can you. If this story touched your heart, I invite you to subscribe now and share in the comments. Where are you watching from? Your testimony might inspire someone else to surrender and receive the grace that cannot be bought. God bless you.